A new report on South Africa's air quality has painted a grim picture and raised concerns over everyone's welfare. According to this report, Gauteng's air quality has regressed the most, registering the least number of clean air days in 2023. Let's discuss this further. We're joined by Professor Bruce Mellado. He's a senior researcher and physicist at Wits University. Prof, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming on. And I suppose why this is so interesting in terms of Gauteng is that the province's, according to this report at least, the province's air quality is worse than Mpumalanga, a province that has 12 coal-fired power stations.
First of all, thanks for having me. And let me give you a little bit of background here. So what we're trying to do in partnership with the DFFA, the corresponding government department that deals with air quality, is to roll out as many possible low cost and acceptable quality, cost-effective systems around the existing systems that we have in the country. And the reason for that is, in order to answer the question of how bad or how good the quality of air is, we really need to measure the air quality in a dense way. We need to have dense networks of these sensors. The only way to achieve that is by rolling out cost-effective sensors that have been thoroughly tested and which pass quality control, which is what we have done, surrounding the more expensive systems that exist today in the so-called SACIS system that's maintained by government. So in order to answer the question, is the air quality better or worse in a particular area, we have to be a little bit more targeted, because as we are learning, we have rolled out the first system, the first large-scale system of cost-effective sensors in June, and the system is growing. What we are learning is that the quality of air and the concentration of pollutants is a very complicated picture, meaning that you can have a fire raging in one place and then a kilometer away not seeing it, and in another location 2 kilometers away see a huge spike as well because of the way the air quality moves. So before we can conclude as to whether Gauteng is worse or better than Limpopo, we really need to roll out this cost-effective system. So from our perspective, from the perspective of people that are measuring systematically and looking at the data in a systematic way, with or without artificial intelligence, we really need to first deploy this cost-effective system surrounding the existing systems.
Yeah. The other thing, I suppose, that makes the study so interesting is that the monitoring stations, when we're looking at air quality, they are placed, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, Prof, but they're placed in areas where we kind of expect the air quality to be at its worst, right? So it's not really, the results don't really reflect the province as a whole.
That's correct. And that goes back to the earlier point that we were trying to make. So yes, you can have an expectation that somewhere the air quality will be bad because of sources, say for instance, traffic or people burning materials. But the fact of the matter is that when you place an expensive station, however accurate and however accurate the measurement is, you're only going to measure the air quality literally within a radius of a few hundred meters, and that's it, sometimes 200 meters only. There are researchers and experts that claim that it's even worse than that. So when you place an expensive station somewhere, you're only probing what happens in the very close vicinity of that area. So in order to really understand the real picture and arrive at conclusions, we really need to surround those expensive stations with more cost-effective, but a very large number of cost-effective sensors, so that we can probe pretty much everywhere within a distance of about 500 meters, which is what we're doing in South Johannesburg at the moment.
Yeah, and in fact, this report tells us that not only is Gauteng the province with the least amount of clean air days, but the country as a whole, in terms of air quality, we've regressed over the past few years, past 7 years or so, since 2017. So the report tells us Gauteng has had 100 days of clean air in 2023, Mpumalanga between 150 to 200, and then the Free State and the Northwest with 200 days of clean air. That sounds pretty grim, Prof, to say that out of the year in Gauteng, we've had 100 days of clean air.
That really needs to be investigated deeper. I think the report you're referring to really triggers and necessitates us going and measuring the air quality in a much more refined and a much more granular way. What we are learning with the system that we have deployed in collaboration with the DFFE is that indeed in the areas where we have deployed, the traffic does generate during certain hours spikes in poor air quality. We have also seen that burning creates very big spikes in poor air quality. So we certainly, at least during the period of time that we have deployed and made measurement, which is the winter in Johannesburg, which is expected to be the worst time of the year because of the lack of rain, we do see that the quality of air in certain areas is fairly poor, at least in the areas where we have measured, for sure.
Right. So at what stage do we talk about serious interventions to address air quality? I mean, there are parts of the world where, you spend the day outside, and at the end of the day, when you take a shower, you can literally see the pollution wash off your body. We're not quite there yet, but at what stage do we talk about how government needs to intervene?
Right. That's an extremely good question. That's the reason that we're doing what we're doing. So in order to really understand how bad and where it is bad, we really need to make measurements that are accurate enough geospatially in space. We have to look at the map and be able to have a dense enough network of sensors that tell us where the quality of air is bad. The fact of the matter is, and the conundrum with air quality is that it's not the average air quality in a city that is a direct measure of how bad the air quality is. Yes, it is indirectly related to it, but what is important is to really understand how bad the hotspots are. It's the identification of hotspots that really matter. Those are the hotspots that will lead to concentration that can even be hazardous for certain communities. So we have to figure out by measuring and using artificial intelligence to understand where those hotspots are. Once we have identified those, then we will be able to understand where that's the pollution comes from and then take remedial action. For instance, suppose we have a significantly large number of sensors in the city of Johannesburg, then we will be able, through an app, to tell people that right now you are located in a hot spot, or tomorrow you're going to be located in a hot spot. And then people are going to be able to say, well, I can wear a mask, or policymakers, if there are sufficient resources to do so, take remedial actions in order to attack those particular hotspots. But the fact of the matter is that before we have those measurements, it is very, very difficult for policymakers to take remedial action or enact remedial action because you cannot basically clean the air in one shot. It's virtually impossible. So what you have to do is to really understand first where the hotspots are located, how they evolved in time and space, and then take corresponding remedial action.
Right. I love the idea of an app that could tell you about the air quality where you live or work, because what it's going to need is buy-in, right, from people who are living in whichever province.
That's absolutely correct. And it should be a government-sponsored app that with results and measurements that have been thoroughly tested by stakeholders that participate and experts in the country, that will be accessible by everyone, just like a map. It will look like a heat map. You will see when you zoom in or zoom out areas where you see or expect to see hotspots to emerge. So once the population is aware of that, they can also take remedial action on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Prof, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. Incredibly important discussion. Professor Bruce Mellado is a senior researcher and physicist at Wits University. We talk about air pollution and Gauteng being a hotspot.